Welcome into this episode of Wear and Tear Bears post-game show. As always, I am Dr. Mason West, and today I am joined for the second time. First time was on Bare Bones, now on Wear and Tear. Brendan Sugrue. Brendan, how you doing?
What's up, Mason? I'm doing great. Really glad to be on with you to talk about just such a dominant win. Is there any better way to start your Sunday morning than to watch the Bears just dismantle the team and have the rest of your day to be able to go on and just enjoy life? I feel great. How about you?
I normally hate the premise of the London games just because the Sunday morning is my fantasy football tinker, grocery shopping, workout, all that kind of stuff, and now I just feel out of sorts. But especially with the kind of win that you just highlighted, yeah, the rest of the day is your oyster. You can do whatever you want with a smile on your face and roll into the week also feeling pretty good.
Yeah, it's something that's very unexpected, I would say, because you and I fall into that same category. I'm not a big fan of the London games, the international games. I'm thrilled for all of our friends overseas who could see this and get to experience it and everything. But just from a Bears team going over there and seeing what we've seen in previous years, it's just there's a lot of room for bad play and mental mistakes and all of that. And it seemed like early on that was going to be the case because the Bears seemed to be sleepwalking. So the fact that they played as well as they did and they had such a dominant and decisive win, I just think is such a big bonus because really you just want to get out of London with a win no matter what. And I just feel really good that it was in this sort of fashion that it happened.
And we'll definitely cover some of the ups, the downs, some of the long-term thought process on this game, with whether it's some of the injuries that occurred, or potentially even just the game itself. Before we do that, I mentioned earlier you were on a Bare Bones episode this summer. It was the schedule prediction show. So we both actually had the Bears going 4-2. I had wins against the Titans, Colts, Panthers, Jaguars, lost to the Texans, Rams. You had wins against the Titans, Rams, Panthers, Jaguars, losses to the Texans and Colts.
Sweet.
No, you should be
That
throwing some
was
money down somewhere because you're on it.
That's amazing. So it's funny because we were talking about this last week on my podcast, the Bear Down Chicago podcast, and I actually flipped because we talked about this in May and we had done then the schedule prediction in August when things kind of settled down a little bit. And I had them winning against the Texans and then losing against the Jaguars. So it's funny. I was more right when I had much less information, like 4 or 5 months ago. So that's pretty great. Thank you for letting me know. That made my day.
Yeah, I just had to. Because I looked and I was excited that I just had the record right 4-2, and then I saw that you had all the picks right. I just had to let you know that. One more thing before we get into this game, I saw you tweeted something, and I had something to the same effect. I don't understand why it seems like Bears fans can't be happy, and why the NFL as a whole fandom has to hate on the Bears. I mean, just so many things coming out of, hey, look at the opponents that you're playing, whether it's the Panthers or in this case, the Jaguars. I mean, I think this morning even the line had flipped to the Jaguars being favored. So, the Bears won a game that they weren't favored in anymore, depending on where you were looking at some of these numbers. And at the end of the day, hearing Trevor Lawrence, depending on your view of him, some people still tout him as a top 15 quarterback. I know there's probably, you can only play who's on your schedule. And it's also the way that they won, right? I mean, today winning 35-16 in a pretty dominant fashion. Same thing last week. Why can't Bears fandom be happy? And why does the NFL hate the Bears?
Well, I think Bears fans are pretty happy because, like you said, they dismantled both opponents the last few weeks who did have one win. Panthers last week 36-10, this week 35-16. I mean, like, if you're a Bears fan, this is exactly how you want your games to go. The offense cruises, you're winning because of the offense. The defense continues to get takeaways. Yeah, maybe a garbage time touchdown or score comes in, but I just, if you were a Bears fan and you're kind of, putting an asterisk on these last two wins, saying, well, it's just the Panthers, it's just the Jaguars. Like like you said, you can only play who's in front of your schedule. And again, they have beaten them down. There was a Texans fan in my mentions who, after I said, like, people need to put respect on the Bears name. And he came back and said, or they, well, they've only beaten teams with a combined 4-16 record. And I'm just like, aren't you the same team that almost got beaten by the Jaguars at home 2-3 weeks ago? It's a week to week league. And especially, like we said, London games are weird. I think anything can happen in these games. So the NFL world definitely needs to respect the Bears. And I think Bears fans, if there is anybody out there who is just sort of, well, it's just the Packers or Panthers and Jaguars, you need to watch the games again and look at how dominant some of these players are and some of these plays are, because this team deserves your respect.
Well, diving into some of the specifics of this game, our diagnostic studies section, it started off a little slow, right? Whether it was how they let the Jaguars march down the field. Yes, only got a field goal out of it, but still moved the ball pretty easily. And then, a 3-and-out for the Bears initially. And it was a 3-and-out that I was not super pumped about.
It's no same. And it's funny because this is coming on the heels of the revelation that came out this past week that Shane Waldron wasn't necessarily scripting his first 15 plays. He was kind of going off feel or something based on what Stacey Dales told 670 The Score. And that was more of the same. I think part of the reason was execution, because the Jaguars defensive line was getting after Caleb Williams early on and they couldn't run the ball. It did feel a little predictable, but I think it was a mix of poor play calling as well as poor execution. And then, you mentioned the defense. They went right at Jalen Jones, who was filling in for Tyreek Stevenson almost immediately. And they were getting those quick passes. It felt like they were in rhythm. I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but the failed potential challenge that Matt Eberflus probably should have thrown on that I think it was Brian Thomas, who had the ball hit the ground before he raced for a first down. So, it looked like the Bears were the team that flew in on Friday morning and was there for only like 55 hours or so versus the team that had been there since Tuesday morning and gotten acclimated. So really wasn't impressed. I don't understand why the Bears continue to get off slow starts. It is, I will say, it is easier to recover from that playing some of these bad teams. But once you do play fiercer competition, you run the risk of putting your team in a hole, whether it's 10-0, 14-0. So if there's one big criticism about the Bears right now, they just need to get off to better starts. And I think you could say that on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit later in the show too, but I might as well talk about it now. But you're absolutely right, because it's fine when you're playing the Jaguars, who I know Q and I talked about this in the preview show. Like, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is bad, but I don't think the phrase I keep using is that he's the prince that was promised. And he's being let down by receivers too. Let's be real. Obviously, Gabe Davis dropped a touchdown early in the game, and then you see Brian Thomas drop one late in the game. Later in the game, the game was already kind of decided, but his team as a whole letting him down there. But at the same time, he's not necessarily firing on all cylinders. However, you are coming up once you get past this bye in the next couple weeks. Then you get into your gauntlet in November, where you play your division basically in its entirety. And the ones in particular that I have circled that I'm worried about is when you're playing a team like the Vikings, where they have such exotic looks, and Brian Flores is just doing mad science stuff. Their offense is also, firing really well right now. So can you really start off as slow as they've been starting when you're playing those kinds of teams? I mean, my answer would be no. And and I'd be very concerned with those.
Yeah, thankfully they do have the bye week to hopefully work on some of these things. I think that one thing that this Bears team has done well, whether it's in games or week by week, is make those adjustments. So I do have maybe not the most faith in the coaching staff, because I think there are certain things that they definitely lack, but I've seen progress from this coaching staff to actually make those adjustments. So I'm feeling optimistic. I won't say confident, but I feel optimistic that some of these issues will be addressed and rectified when they come back in 2 weeks to play the Commanders.
Really quick here, T-Rick saying 3 drop passes for T-Law. He wasn't their problem. Yes, there is a truth to that one, but at the same time, I don't think if you watch this game wholly, besides maybe that first drive, that you could look and see that Trevor Lawrence really elevated his team at the same time too. And I think that's the hard part when you talk about Trevor Lawrence, is that more often than not, people want to make it black and white. He's good or he's bad. That's not where he lives right now, right? He can still be a top 15 quarterback, number 14 or 15, but is that really the goods that you were sold a couple years ago when you drafted him number 1 overall, right? For example, if Trevor Lawrence's current trajectory is what Caleb Williams ends up being at this point in time in his career, I mean, I'll be upset.
Yeah. So I kind of boil this down to a simple phrase, and I've used it for other Bears quarterbacks. I've used it for other quarterbacks in the league. Trevor Lawrence may not be the problem, but he's not the solution, at least right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. Like, if you're living in that top 18 to 14 quarterback range. That tells me you have a guy that is capable of winning, but you need a lot to go right for him. And for the Jaguars, a lot of things that went right last week, like the rush offense, where they were able to rely on guys like Tank Bigsby to just get the ground game going, that wasn't there. And so once Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense became one-dimensional because of the Bears defense, then you started to see things start to unravel. And yes, I think it's important to point out that some of those were drop passes. You talked about we saw the Elijah Hicks breakup on the first series that led to the field goal. Great play by him. But again, that's not necessarily his problem. But as you said, he's not elevating his players to become great, meaning he's not necessarily the solution, at least right now. I think there still is promise in him. He's still so young. It's his 4th year, and obviously they're committed to him, so they have to find something, some way to work with him. But right now, he is not the solution for the Jaguars.
So you mentioned the bye week, and besides just, getting your X's and O's potentially cleaned up a little bit, the other thing that you're hoping for is to clean up some of these injuries that you saw today. Long snapper Scott Daly suffered a knee injury and was ruled out for the remainder of this game. That one, I'm not as concerned with. You have to kind of see what that was. I have to look at the film and see exactly what occurred there before I can really make any proclamations in terms of potential return time. But I mean, you saw, right? I mean, obviously you lost your initial long snapper before the season even started. You were able to just go snag someone, and it's been fine. I think you're going to be able to fill in long snapper if Scott Daly cannot go, or if potentially maybe Patrick Scales is not available to come back. The one that's the bigger issue that I'm really worried about is Kyler Gordon. Went down with a clear hamstring right away. Grabbed at it immediately, and he was ruled out. I mean, you mentioned this in the green room before you even started, that he went out pretty quickly, like to the tent and into the locker room in short order. The problem there is, I mean, if it's like a grade 1, you're thinking a couple days. But, now when you get into the grade 2s, which that's kind of where I'm leaning based on the film, if not a 3. Grade 2, you're talking about a couple weeks at least. That's going to be 3-ish, 4-ish weeks. And then when you're talking about even now a grade 3, which is more of like a partial tear, I mean, that's like 4 to 8 weeks without any kind of surgical. You don't need it in a grade 3, but it depends on the severity. Even within a 3, it's still a gray area. And then obviously 4, that's where you're talking about complete tears, and you need surgery there. So that one's a big concern. Fortunately, with the bye, you still have a couple weaker teams coming up between Commanders and Patriots and things of that nature. We'll have to ultimately see, but I think before the gauntlet comes in November, he could be back. But again, depending on the severity of that, I mean, you might be missing him for some extended time. Like we're talking like up to 2 months potentially.
And that's such a crucial loss because he has found his role in this defense. I know Kyler Gordon, for his first 2 years, he's flashed, he's improved his pass defense, and he's always been a good tackler, especially against the run. But man, the way that Eberflus and Eric Washington have been using him this year, you saw him just blitz from the corners, from the nickel spot. He's been in on every run play, pretty much. He's been getting tackles for losses. I mean, in this game before he left, he was second in total tackles, tied for second with total tackles with 7. He had 5 solo. He had 1 TFL. I mean, he was getting off blockers as well. And you saw when he went out, yes, Josh Blackwell had the nice interception, I believe it was, but you were missing an element without him, and especially without Brisker. So I am worried that they're going to be missing something on their defense if he's out for an extended period of time. Like you said, hopefully it's only maybe a couple games or so, especially the bye week is coming at a great time. Even though the Bears are rolling, you want to get these guys healthy. But they do have at least good depth that can fill in, maybe not to the same role or, same expectations that Kyler Gordon has. And then, hopefully the other guys kind of get healthy. Tyreek Stevenson went out in practice. He was doubtful, so he didn't play. Jaquan Brisker, of course, is dealing with a concussion, and Terrell Smith has been out with a hip injury for a while. So, I mean, you at least ease it a little bit if you can get those guys back and manage without Gordon. But yeah, I'm devastated because he's been playing some great ball so far this season.
Yeah, I haven't really talked too much about the calf injury yet for Tyreek Stevenson. That's another one of those ones, just the amount of power that you ultimately need from the calf and how that usually comes in. I mean, you need a couple weeks for that. So again, bye week couldn't come at a better time, because could he potentially come back after 2 weeks going to that Commanders game? Always a possibility. However, even that one might need an extra week or two. And I have no idea what's happening with Terrell Smith. I mean, they haven't leaked out any info in terms of, and that happened in practice, so there's not even any film to go back on. Before we move on, a couple stats here that I like your thought process on, specifically about Caleb Williams. Brad Biggs tweeted that Caleb Williams has had 4 passing touchdowns in this game. It is only the 10th time since 2000 a Bears quarterback has thrown 4+ touchdown passes in a game. The previous 9 were Jay Cutler 4 times, Justin Fields twice, Mitch Trubisky once, Josh McCown once, and Rex Grossman once. And then Mark Potash tweeted out that the Bears scored 5 offensive touchdowns in back-to-back games for the first time since 1956. Those seems like good things for the Bears right now and bad things for history.
56. I saw the Biggs one. I didn't see the Potash one. Good God, man. Yeah, it's both a testament to what this offense is doing with Caleb Williams and just the ineptitude that has followed the Chicago Bears for so many years. But I'm just so impressed. I keep going back. I was tweeting out just the stuff or the stats that Caleb Williams was closing in on the rookie totals for Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky. They both had 7 touchdowns their entire rookie seasons. Caleb has passed that already in his 6th game. And I just keep going back to this is week 6. And you are just seeing an offense operate so smoothly with him under center. And I think it's not only just the passing game, which he's been so accurate the past couple weeks, but the running game's getting going. The operation is smoother. The Bears they had 2 penalties today. And I know it was basically a home game, but the fact that they were able to get the offensive operation to run so smoothly in a different environment, in a completely different continent, mind you, was just so impressive to see. But I'm just seeing such good growth. And I have said last week on my podcast, as well as on Bears Wire, I kept saying that Caleb Williams, he was close to arriving. I basically likened it to he had shut the car door, he had his flowers, and he is walking up the steps to the porch, but he was not there yet. You needed to see a little bit more. I'm comfortable in saying Caleb Williams has arrived. And I know that he's only played against a couple bad defenses, but just the way that he is threading the needle on some of these throws, trusting his receivers, whether it's those middle darts to Keenan Allen or the rollout and across his body to Cole Kmet for that big first down. I mean, you name it. There's so many different big throws that he's made. I just cannot be more impressed with not only how this offense looks, but where it's come from week 1 to week 2. And you're seeing incremental and sustained growth across the entire board. So I'm really happy. This is exactly the kind of stuff you wanted to see, and being 4-2 going into the bye. I think every Bears fan, if you had told them this going into the season, every single one of them would have taken it.
Yeah, the last couple of games were a perfect example of why I was kind of selling the Bears receivers as fantasy options, because I never know who's going to go off.
Yeah.
Like you had DJ Moore against the Panthers. Then you had Keenan Allen, who just, erupted today in terms of not just with the scores he had, obviously, but, like you mentioned, I'm so glad you mentioned those short throws, because that was exactly what you were hoping for, that he could, hit that slant and just be that safety blanket. Hey, we need 4 yards. Hey, we need 6 yards. And, you talk about too, it's not the point anymore where, let's say it was the goal line and there's that penalty, the pre-snap operation issue where it almost a Keenan touchdown. And then you still get a Keenan touchdown losing yards, or sometimes where you have a 3rd and 9, you have a 2nd and 14, and it no longer feels like just automatic field goal punt world, where I can now sit there and say, no, Caleb has a chance to get this. And you just haven't had that from a Bears quarterback in a long time. And even as excited as I was when Justin was, hitting on all cylinders with his combination of some of the passing and more to an extent the running, that still felt like, hey, this is it. All right, we got a quick break here, and then we're going to dive into some categories. We got that dog in us. It is the greatest time of the year. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Signing up with Underdog is smooth and easy. I especially like using their mobile app, as it makes making picks easy as hell. Something pretty cool is their Vulture protection. Get your entry refunded and receive a promo code if Vulture leads you to a loss. Define Vulture as a rushing touchdown scored by a player not designated as a running back. I also love the variety they have compared to other betting sites and apps, such as their 4-person Battle Royale draft. Just pick players for this week and profit. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code CITY, C-I-T-Y, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code CITY, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Maine and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. So as we thought, and not. This is just something we expected to happen that did, and something we were a bit surprised by. So what did you think that would happen that did today?
What did I think that would happen? Well, I in my bold predictions for Bears Wire, the first thing I put out was that Keenan Allen catches his first Bears touchdown. And maybe it wasn't that bold because it just felt like the stars were aligning for this to happen. And by stars, I mean Caleb Williams just really saying, hey, we need to get you a touchdown, man. Because last week in his mic'd up, he kept saying, hey, I need to get you one. When talking to Keenan Allen on the sidelines, Rich Eisen did his production meeting with the Bears and Williams, and he said he got the sense that the Bears were going to be looking towards Allen's way. Clearly, that was the case because he caught the 2 touchdowns. He essentially caught 3 with the penalty that we mentioned earlier. But I just felt like with how the Bears are spreading the ball around, and I think Williams does have sense he wants to get guys going, wants to get comfortable with certain guys. We saw the DJ Moore game. We saw the Rome Odunze game. And it just felt like the Keenan Allen game was going to happen. And based on kind of reading those tea leaves and hearing what people were saying, I felt good about saying that Keenan Allen was going to get a touchdown.
Yeah, I actually had the same exact one written down. You go back to, again, the preview show that we did with Quentin. My bold prediction was that Keenan Allen would lead the team in receiving and would have a touchdown or something of that nature. And I mean, he ended up having 5 receptions on 5 targets, so didn't have a single drop, 41 yards, didn't quite lead the team in receiving yards, but that's also because Cole Kmet just went ham today, especially that funky, really cool play that he had his first touchdown on. But there's a truth to, right? You got to keep guys engaged. And I think that's important. And Caleb realizes that, right? I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, you can be playing pickup basketball, and if you don't get past the ball and get a chance for a jumper or a layup in the first 10 minutes that you're playing, you're going to tune out a little bit. Your brain's not going to be as engaged in it. And professional athletes are humans too. You got to keep guys engaged. You got to keep guys happy. And when you have Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, there's a lot of people to keep happy. And Caleb is trying to do the best he can with that by just spraying the ball around. If you look, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different guys, 8 targeted that for different receptions today. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, he's been really good about spreading the ball around overall, but just seeing the amount, I guess, in volume that certain guys are getting now, like Keenan Allen, because the last week it was like 3 for 33, and this week 5 for 41. Of course, the 2 touchdowns in the red zone, so that's increasing. But to talk about the things I thought would happen that didn't, there were a couple, and I don't really know which way to go for this. I'll mention 2. I'll cheat. I really thought that the Jaguars were going to run the ball a lot better, and I'm thankful that they weren't able to do that. I thought this was going to be a big Tank Bigsby game because he was so good at bouncing off tacklers. He only had 7 carries for 24 yards. Not too impressive. And I also thought that this was going to be a big Rome Odunze game in terms of yardage. I saw what Alec Pierce did last week against the Jaguars secondary with Joe Flacco throwing him the ball. And I figured, hey, if Alec Pierce can do that with Joe Flacco, I'm sure Rome Odunze can do that as well and get behind those defensive backs. And early on, it kind of seemed like that would happen. He hit, I think it was 2 passes. Yeah, 2 catches for 40 yards early in the first half. And then he just didn't really do much after that. So I thought this was going to be a bigger Rome Odunze game. I'm okay that it wasn't, because the Bears obviously did way more than enough on offense to get the game, to get the win.
Yeah, I mean, in total, the Jaguars only had 68 net rushing yards, and combining how well they've been running the ball, specifically with Tank Bigsby, and how the Bears have let up some decent chunks, that was a bit surprising. I already talked about mine a little bit earlier. The lack of ball movement early. I really thought the Bears could take advantage of a bad banged up unit early for the Jaguars defense. The Bears, that was the Bears' fourth scoreless first quarter this season, and they had 6 scoreless quarters all of 2023. So they're already on pace to pass that. We're really hoping after the bye week, obviously, that shifts gears because, like we already mentioned, you really need to stay on top of things here.
Yep. If we can just quickly, if we can just maybe take the part of Luke Getsy's brain that was so good at scripting plays and getting first quarter points, put that in Shane Waldron's brain and let him do the rest, this team would be unstoppable. So that's the only criticism there.
That's a really good point, highlighting that. It's going to be a good day. This is where we just talk about something positive. There's a lot to talk about. What was yours?
I would say just the overall play of Cole Kmet. I mean, this guy you can make an argument he's the MVP of the game because he was just, first of all, he led the Bears in receiving. We talked about that. 5 receptions, 70 yards, the 2 touchdowns. The first one, by the way, bouncing off 2 tacklers to fight his way towards the end zone. That was impressive. I mean, Kmet's a big dude, but seeing him just be able to, rumble, what was the Chris Berman thing? He's rumbling, bumbling, stumbling to the end zone. Yeah, that was great. And then immediately having to be called on to fill in for Scott Daly as the long snapper and do a really good job. I don't know about you, I was very concerned that the Bears would end up having to go for it on 4th down, a lot of 2-point conversions. And they said, nope, we feel comfortable about this. And yes, they did have the missed field goal late in the game. You could probably blame the long snap a little bit because it was tipped, but he did a very good job in not ideal circumstances. So credit to Cole Kmet for doing it on offense and doing it on special teams. As Rich Eisen said, there is no I in Kmet.
Which I absolutely love that line when you threw that out there. Mine is going to talk about the run game. And actually, Adrian highlighted this a little bit too. So great minds think alike. Adrian said, if the run game translates against better teams, Jacksonville run defense was top 10 before this team. I think that will be a game breaker against the better teams. Part of the reason why the team struggled against the better defenses wasn't just the O-line, it was the fact that O-line was non-existent. And I think that's absolutely true that this team really needs the run game to operate well because now you can build in some of the play action, some of those naked boots that Caleb is really, really good at in terms of being able to manage the one defender off the edge, whether that's because of the speed that he does have or the wiggle that he has to make that first guy miss. DeAndre Swift had 17 runs for 91 yards today, 5.4 average. That's my biggest thing is that average, which was the biggest average of anyone in this game. And also that rushing touchdown, which is nice to see him rewarded with the score there, as much as I love Roshan on the goal line, but getting DeAndre his runs. He's also, to me, one of the most frustrating individuals because it's so Jekyll Hyde. There'll be a run where it's just like, I don't understand how you got tackled there. Like he had 3 fingers on you. And then there's another one where he just breaks it off for a 19-yard gain and spinning off of 3 defenders. So, it's very up and down with him. But if you can continue that, that's a great sign.
I think he's becoming a little less Jekyll and Hyde, though, because we saw a lot more of that early in the season, and now he is just sustaining those longer runs. I'm so impressed with his side-to-side movement and making those cuts. He just looks like he's moving at a different speed versus the defenders, and that's something the Bears haven't had in a running back in quite a long time. I know they had David Montgomery, who's good about shedding tacklers, and Khalil Herbert was good at that one cut, but the fact that Swift can continue to do that and more, I think it also shows that he's trusting his blockers too. We talk about the offense as a whole running more efficiently as just a complete operation. And I think that goes to show he is trusting what he's seeing with the guys up front. So I do think, just to say, like, you make a really good point about the Jekyll and Hyde, but it's more, I guess, Jekyll than Hyde or vice versa. I can never remember which one's good and bad, but it's more good than bad lately.
You're absolutely right. It's definitely been a shift. And part of that is the offensive line for sure. Nate Davis was not the problem here. I'm not going to be the person that is circling Nate Davis and said, get rid of him and things will change. But the fact that he was just a healthy scratch today kind of shows where the Bears are leaning towards now at this point. I think for example, Davis had more wow plays just because he is a little more athletic than Pryor. Pryor's just a big hulking, I'm going to kill you, dude. But Pryor's misses, especially in the run game, I think are a bit less versus Davis's. There was more more explosive issues when Davis would miss. So the fact that Pryor is able to just get and swallow people up. I'll have to look back at the all 22 and see ultimately how they were able to get to the second level today, because that's been a bit better as well. Seeing if Pryor was able to do that. Jenkins was a little rough early on, but seemed to clean stuff up as the game went on here. And then same thing with Shelton. I still think ultimately the best offensive line is going to have Ryan Bates at center. I'm curious what that looks like. Do you use the bye week to integrate Bates back in, because he does snap differently? He's a righty versus Coleman being a lefty. But Coleman has looked pretty good these last 3 games. He's very good at getting to the second level. His problem is more just getting crushed in the pass game because he's too late.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's going to be an interesting dilemma if it is one. I have a couple questions for you. With Nate Davis first, has he played his last game as a Bear?
I think so.
I think so too.
Because you can get out of that money this summer pretty easily. And ultimately, like, the Bears are screaming at you what they think. It was different when he was just chilling on the bench, but with a healthy scratch, that's bad for him.
Yeah, I'm very. I wonder if they give him the old Kyle Long treatment going back from London to be like, yeah, just go away for a bit, or maybe we'll just release you and eat the money. Because yeah, they're going with Pryor, they're going with Bill Murray. Larry Borum is potentially coming back soon. It sounds like Ryan Bates is closer. But yeah, I don't think they mess with the center position yet, because you're right. Shelton, just off initial contact, if he's beat, he's beat. Like, he's done, he's on the ground. But he is athletic enough to get downfield and sustain some of those blocks for longer runs, which I think has been so effective and big reasons why the Bears offense has been moving the ball and having success once you get into the red zone. I don't know if you then use this bye week to just say, okay, we're making a change now, because I don't think he's, I don't think he's lost his job yet because of how he's played, but I think maybe you put him on notice a little bit and say, hey, Bates is here. We have to continue to see positive moments out of you. And then once you start struggling, maybe against some of these better units that you mentioned, then we talk about making a change. So I don't think it happens anytime in the next week or so, but knowing that you have that option, I think gives the Bears, I think it's a positive, because now you're creating competition. He's got to be his best in order to keep that job.
Our concussed corner, something in the game that was so odd the decision maker must have been concussed. What was yours?
This is easy. This is Matt Eberflus not calling the challenge. I mean, he struggled with challenges for so often, so long. And I saw it in real time. As soon as that ball hit the ground, I'm like, that could probably be challenged, because anytime a ball hits the ground like that, and even it moves just a little bit, I think that it has a good chance of coming back. And I thought there was more than enough time for Eberflus to see that and throw the challenge flag. Like we said earlier, it was a first down. So it was a first down going into the red zone too. So I think that's a perfect time to use it to try and get a second and long there. It's just enough. I think the Bears need to hire somebody to be a challenge specialist. Just have somebody right next to Matt Eberflus. Let him do everything he needs to. It's like the Broncos hiring the game clock guy 2 years ago with Nathaniel Hackett to just show him when play clocks are running down. Get somebody to just watch the tablet and say, hey, Matt, I think you need to throw the challenge flag right here. Or maybe just, take it out of his pocket and put it in his hand and then just say, throw it, because it's just been way too, he's thrown it at the wrong times and he has not thrown it at the right times.
I agree that as a whole, Eberflus's challenge or not challenge has not been great. That's been the case the last couple of weeks. This one I went back and forth on myself, because I just had flashes to the Calvin Johnson touchdown where he got the ball, had control, and really that should have been a touchdown in all reality. And I'm not going to argue it, but for here, I just thought there was enough control with what Brian Thomas did that I could see it standing. And I was okay with down and distance. Yes, second and long would be nice, but ultimately how the Bears have done in the red zone in terms of preventing, you're kind of already in that field goal range. So I was okay with it, especially knowing London games are funky. And if you lose a timeout there, does that really hamper you right later in that half? But I can absolutely see where someone would want to challenge that. Mine was a different challenge that actually got overturned, which was the fumble, right, by Etienne that Edmonds had caused. I thought, for me, it has to be indisputable evidence. Like, you have to be able to say for sure that this is different to flip the play. And to me, there wasn't indisputable evidence. To me, Etienne made a football move. He turned up and into Edmonds, and that should have stood. I don't love ultimately what that did, like what that looked like. To me, like the definition of indisputable seems a bit flippant at times.
It's funny because I sort of feel the same way that you did about the other one, where I'm like, you know what? I could I guess I could see it either way, but you do make a good point about if the call is if the original call is a fumble, you do need that indisputable evidence. I don't think it was indisputable, but I didn't think it should have been called a fumble in the first place because I thought it was, in that gray area. So I wasn't too upset about it. But at the same time, maybe I wasn't too upset about it because I wasn't too surprised because Brad Allen is not a good ref. I mean, for those who don't remember, he is the same guy who just completely whiffed on the eligible lineman last year for the Detroit Lions that cost them the game against the Dallas Cowboys. He's had a ton of misses. His crew is just not very effective. So I just kind of threw my hands up and I'm like, that's Brad Allen for you. Thankfully, both of those calls did not matter in the long run, but they were frustrating. So I do understand your point.
And not even specifically with that play, but we are just in a day and age, a time where we have so much technology at our fingers that it surprises me that there isn't more consistent calls from New York or this or that, where it seems like things that are so obviously either correct or incorrect, not being validated when you can, slow things down to frames per second. Like it shouldn't just be put on an Allen at this point, but it is what it is. Next category, we hear for moral support. This is something that is an area to work on. That was a problem in this game. What do you got?
Problem to work on. I got to think about this for a second. Well, no, I guess I don't have to think about it. We've hammered the point enough, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. But getting off to fast starts. I'm just trying to think about the good. I'm not trying to think about the bad. Everything you mentioned, the Bears only having points in like one game this year in the first quarter, maybe two, 3 and outs to start the game in. Oh, I think it's consecutive games, maybe going back 3 weeks. They got 1 first down, but like I said, just put that part of Luke Getsy's brain that was so good at game scripting, put it into Shane Waldron, and problem solved. But yes, hopefully they take a good long look this week and figure out how they can get off to better starts because my God, like they are so good at adjusting and getting things going after a couple series. The other suggestion I had was maybe just run your script against the scout team before the game in warmups and just get it out of your system and then do whatever you're going to do in the third series to start the game because that seems to work.
I mean, that's a really good one. For me, it's going to be, and it's not like awful. Don't get me wrong. I think like you kind of are highlighted yourself. I'm kind of scraping for things because I was pretty happy with how this game went. But for me, there are still too many times where it feels like Waldron's goal simply is to get to third and manageable. And that's, run, pass is an example. Some of those, the way the screens are called, I still don't, why do we need an Everett screen ever anymore? I don't understand that. So today the Bears were 5 for 11 on third down, 45%, which isn't terrible, right? If you think about league leaders right now in third down percentages, I mean, like Washington at 51.67. You have in fifth, you have Detroit at 45.83%. So you're not in a bad group being in the high 45, in the mid to high 40s. I just would like it to be just like a titch better where, again, the easiest way to stay out of or to convert on third downs is really not to even get into them. Get more first downs on first and second down. And then when you're in third down, convert more of those. But at the end of the day, like we saw, Keenan Allen was a bit of an easy mode button on some of those. So just more of that would be great.
I have a question for you again.
Mm-hmm.
So the interception play that was 3rd and 1 or 2.
Oh, yeah.
It was the play action. Caleb Williams had great protection. DJ Moore beats his guy and Williams underthrows it. Some people, not me, but some people were mad that they just didn't run the ball up the middle to convert. Did you have a problem with the play call?
No, not at all. I think I was ecstatic with it because that was Waldron saying, hey, Caleb, I trust you to go do this. I mean, obviously it didn't turn out right, but I love the aggressiveness from Waldron. I love the aggressiveness from Caleb. And it just wasn't a good ball, but I know Caleb can throw that. It just was a bad club choice. He put too much air on it.
Yeah, and everybody else executed their job to perfection. They sold the run fake so well. Caleb had plenty of time in the pocket. And to me, I haven't, obviously, because we're talking right now. I'm very interested to see what was going through his head on that play. We know that Caleb struggled with overthrows to start the year, and he's gotten better. Overthrows on his deep balls, excuse me. And he's gotten better the last few weeks. I wonder if he kind of saw it and he's like, I got to make sure that this ball gets into DJ's hand. And he just knew he did not put enough air under it because he was afraid of overthrowing him into the back of the end zone. So it is one of those things. He's still working on his timing, but you're right. Waldron called a great play. I love the aggressiveness to put it in his quarterback's hands, and credit to the other 10 players on offense for executing that to perfection. Unfortunately, the quarterback, that was his one bad play, I would say, of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, we got one more break here, and then we're going to get into the final stretch of this show. What's important? Stats. This is a stat from the game that you felt was important.
I'm going to go with Caleb Williams' quarterback rating, 124.4. He is now 3 games consecutive with a passer rating of over 100. Obviously, the interception hurt, but he overcame it. And the ability to, I guess, for the most part, take care of the ball, but, keep firing touchdowns, keep playing at an elite level, no matter what the defense is. I just can't remember a rookie quarterback. It's never happened, honestly, with the Bears, but a guy having 3 consecutive games with a passer rating of over 100 and 2 consecutive games having a passer rating of over 120. That's growth, and it's sustained growth. And now he is essentially finding his level. So I am just very impressed with I'm saying impressed a lot, but it's true. I love his quarterback rating of 124.4.
That is a great stat, and one that, if you only throw air quotes for 226 yards. To know how impactful that was, 124.4, it shows that. My important stat, and not to beat a dead horse, but I do think it's so important going forward. The Bears were outgained in terms of yardage, 98 yards to 7 yards in the first quarter. The Jags had the ball for 11 minutes and 16 seconds. Now, in the first drive, 67 yards for the Jaguars. The Bears defense really started locking down. The second, third, and fourth drives, they had a total of 31 yards. You're not going to be able to hold every single team you play to 31 yards across 3 drives after the first one. So locking down, getting a little more on both sides of the ball, right? On the defense, not allowing 67-yard first drive, but at the same time on offense, not having 7 freaking yards in the first quarter.
Yeah, it's credit to the defense, credit to both units, really, for the offense for stepping up to get the defense out of the hole, but for the defense to find their footing, make some of those big stops, and then start generating takeaways and limiting the Jaguars to become a one-dimensional team once you get down early. It tells a lot about this team to be able to get out of that hole early on, but just stop putting yourself in the hole. Keep the shovel over there. And if you get off to a great start, I want to see what this team looks like when they get off to like a 10-0 start. How good can they be? Because we've seen them come back now. I think the stat from Rich Eisen earlier in the game was that the Bears have trailed. The Bears have never been the team to score first. They've always trailed to start. So let's see what this team looks like when they actually build a lead in the first quarter.
Yeah, to be able, think about what Caleb had to deal with last year, even at USC. He was pretty much always behind because that defense was so horrendous, and he was always having to put the Superman cape on. The year before that, when he had more weapons on offense, and also the defense wasn't terrible. It was a Heisman year. So to be able to see what Caleb and the confidence and what he can do when he has a lead consistently is going to be something pretty cool. Kombucha, peak performance moments. This is a defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Use code BEARGUTCHECK. If you're watching live, you can see it scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Go to kombucha.com, use that code, get 11% off your order. Mine was going to be Cole Kmet's 31-yard touchdown pass from Caleb Williams with 11:07 left in the second quarter. After the rough start on offense, after giving up some points, right? me as that Bears fan going kind of right back to, okay, here we go again, even though you're only down by 3. But to be able to go out, score that touchdown in a pretty dominant fashion, like the explosiveness of a play like that from a guy, Cole Kmet, who to me is one of the most important players on this team in terms of heartbeat. I mean, you add in the fact of what he did on special teams to have to go in there and long snap when that's just not your job. And you don't really think about that ever really being something you're going to have to ultimately worry about. I think Cole did talk about when he had his podcast, the 85. I think that he may have said that was the thing he's most scared of any game day is having to do that. And his worst fears came to fruition, but he did an overall pretty good job. But yeah, to be able to go out, score that touchdown, run through 2 guys, extend, score the touchdown, and then snap and be able to get a field goal out of it, huge moment.
Matt Eberflus might have had the quote of the day when he was coming back from the halftime and he was interviewing with Stacey Dales. And he said, Cole Kmet might be the first person in NFL history to have 2 touchdowns and snap for 2 extra points at the same time. And he might be right about that. And that leads me into my defining moment, or the peak performance moment, excuse me. And it was the second touchdown for Cole Kmet because this was the 2-minute drill. Caleb was phenomenal when it came to not only passing the ball, but he had some big runs. He knew when he had to tuck and run it. He didn't give up. The Bears were able to get, I think that was also the drive that they were able to get a couple. Actually, no, I don't think this one was not the penalty drive where they were able to keep moving the ball from some of those holding calls, pass interference calls. But I thought Caleb was in total control. The Bears operated the 2-minute offense to perfection. He threw a great ball to Kmet. I mean, some people are mad at me online because I keep comparing previous quarterbacks, but you know what? I am just showing how great Caleb Williams has been. When is the last time the Bears have just operated the 2-minute offense this effectively with a quarterback? We have not seen it in, I feel like, a few years. No disrespect to Justin Fields, but it was not his forte. So the fact that he continues to be able to take the offense, run it his own way. Matt Eberflus, I thought, managed the timeouts effectively. And then they're able to go into halftime with a 14-3 lead. That's huge. So I'm very pleased with just what this offense looks like in crunch time. And that kind of goes into what it looks like in the fourth quarter too, because I think they have the best fourth quarter differential of any team in the NFL. Again, when's the last time the Bears had an offense that could actually score points and move the ball in the fourth quarter? It's been a while.
If you're not excited about what the Bears are currently doing, and you can't see the difference between what Caleb is doing, and you have to compare it because that's all we know to past Bears quarterbacks, you're not watching the game. Masseter, player of the game, aka our MVP. The masseter is one of the jaw muscles, and it can close the teeth with a force of up to 55 pounds on the incisors and 200 pounds on the molars. Small muscle, big output, super important for our eating, our talking, our smiling, all those things. Who is your MVP of this game?
Well, I said him before, so I'll stick with it. But Cole Kmet, once again, 5 catches, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, filling in for the long snapper position. But because I don't think you're going to take this guy, I'll just do an honorable mention quick to Elijah Hicks, a.k.a. who I call the Flying Squirrel. This guy had a game that I didn't think he was capable of. He had struggled over his first 2 seasons in coverage at safety. He, of course, had the big pass breakup to limit the Jaguars to 3 points. He had the fumble recovery that then led to the Bears touchdown, this third touchdown, in the third quarter. So I was very just surprised, I would say, that Elijah Hicks was able to have the game that he had. So he gets honorable mention because Cole Kmet's still my MVP.
I'm really glad you brought up Hicks because I know that going into this game, I was pretty vocally worried about it. He just hasn't graded out well. He hasn't looked good in the limited snaps that he has had as he's been a Chicago Bear. But like you said, today, I mean, he was not a problem, and he had some pretty good plays actually too. So give him his flowers. Jalen Jones also just deserved, because he was getting targeted early. So Jalen Jones deserves that conversation as well. Both of them were able to step up. And then lastly, even Blackwell, right? You mentioned the interception that he had. Is he ultimately going to have the impact in the run game that that your Kyler Gordon's going to have? Probably not, but all 3 of those guys really do deserve a mention. Mine was Cole Kmet. The only other thing I'll layer on to what you already said was just that what he does in the run game is so important in terms of his blocking. And I don't know that there is a better, not to drink the Kool-Aid, but a better all all around tight ends than Cole Kmet, especially in a year right now where, I mean, if you're a fantasy football player, the tight end position is not great right now. Sam Laporta is not really producing like you want. Kelsey is basically just not being used much at all, and I think is being saved for the playoffs. So at the end of the day, like just the fact that Cole does everything you want from blocking on the run to some of the pass blocking he does to receiving the ball, and then today long snapping, it's wild.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I did miss the opportunity to highlight his key seal block on the big DeAndre Swift screen. He was one-on-one, basically playing the tackle position, and he held his own just enough for Caleb to find Swift in the middle of the field and him to go downfield to get into the red zone. That was all Cole Kmet, because if we've seen guys whiff on those blocks, it's very likely a sack and possibly a fumble. Because that's how that play needed to be set up. So I'm really glad you brought that up because I totally forgot to highlight it. And you're exactly right. He is a jack of all trades tight end. Boy, it feels like we're a long ways away from the conversations about, is Cole Kmet good? Is he a bust? Like there were some pretty big arguments going on in Bears Twitter land back in 2021 and 2022. So I think everybody now sees the value of what Cole Kmet can provide this team.
Even now, because this is coming from a Cole Kmet stan, I will admit, like I've been pounding the table as a Cole Kmet supporter for forever now, tweeting out like that. I can't believe this was ever really a conversation, and people still trying to come at me about how like, oh, he wasn't good early on. And it's what tight end rookie year is good when you have to do, especially his version, right, where he has to play the Y and he has to do all those things. Usually your rookie year, usually your sophomore year, they're not great. But even then, I mean, he was leading the league, or sorry, he was like third in the league in touchdowns in like 2022, I believe, something like that. Like, I can go on and on, but I'm glad that hopefully we can just put that to bed. Last category, prognosis period. A brief look ahead. What does this mean for the team? What does this game mean? And then what does really the rest of the season hold for us as things sit? What do you got?
Well, this is exactly the position the Bears want to be in. I know we mentioned it before. 4-2 going into the bye. You have a decisive win in London. You have a big opponent coming up too, because before the season, I think everybody looked at the Commanders and said, they're probably not going to be much. But the Commanders, credit to them, are rolling. They have built an offense around Jane Daniels. From just a football standpoint, I am so excited to see these two rookie quarterbacks go back to back. I'm very interested to see what Cliff Kingsbury's offense looks like when it comes to facing this Bears defense. And I guess I'm just hopeful that some of these guys that we mentioned before, Tyree Stevenson, Jaquan Brisker, maybe not Kyler Gordon if the hamstring injury is what it is, depending on the severity, but getting these secondary individuals back, maybe Zach Pickens, who knows, but getting these guys healthy and getting ready for another stretch run, because I don't want to say that these next few teams are elite before you get into the divisional period, but it is a step up from the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers, beginning with the Commanders. So it's a good week to get rest. I hope that this momentum continues, and I hope that this layoff doesn't necessarily mean that the Bears come out even flatter and for a longer period of time against the Commanders, because this team has found their identity, I would say. They're a complementary football team. They can rely on their quarterback to make plays downfield. The run game is going, and they have a ferocious defense that is bend but don't break and can create turnovers pretty much at will. So, not much better than being 4-2 going into the bye for this Bears team.
The only things I'll add to what you said on that is, early on, obviously this summer, everyone, and myself included, was talking about how this is the best situation a number one drafted overall quarterback has been into. And then with some of the early returns, I know a lot of people were like, is this really the case? And it's like, yes, that's still the case, because it's still a rookie and it's still a funky situation, but you're reap the benefits of that, right? How well the defense is playing. You saw the Keenan Allen game today. You saw the DJ Moore game last week. You've seen the consistent, Cole Kmet as needed. And then I think Rome at some point is going to come into his own. You see it on tape. He's open a lot. He just hasn't necessarily gotten the ball. So we are exactly where you want to be. Going into obviously next week, you got the bye. Super important for some of these things to hopefully heal up, where your secondary can get patched up a little bit. I'll keep an eye on what's going on with Kyler Gordon and what that ultimately looks like. And for this Commanders game, I mean, right now they're actually tied 3-3 against the Ravens. I'm going to turn that game on more or less as soon as we end here. Didn't necessarily think it'd be a field goal battle, but I'm really excited to see this. I'm really excited for what this means for the future of NFL quarterbacking. Like I think, a world exists where Caleb can be good, Jaden can be good. I don't know how sustainable his play is. That's a whole other conversation, but that's good for the NFL, right? We have a issue where, I mean, you mentioned this earlier. Trevor Lawrence is the only quarterback on his original team that was in that draft. That's not good for the NFL. We don't have that 28 to 32-year-old prime quarterback really that exists. We don't have the Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning cluster of guys for this generation of QB. So if these guys can be good, that's awesome for the NFL. I wish this game could get flexed, right? That would be fantastic. But the Cowboys are playing the 49ers on Sunday Night Football, and you can actually flex a Sunday game between weeks 5 and 10, and you're not flexing that game out. And then you can't do a Monday night game until weeks 12 to 17. So the game is staying where it is.
I don't know. I was going to ask, do you think there's a chance? I think there's still a chance.
I just feel like Cowboys and 49ers, even though, like, if you go neutral football fan, right now it's not the most exciting game because of how the Cowboys have looked and honestly the 49ers. But just ratings wise, the Cowboys are the Cowboys are the Cowboys. And there's a reason why different TV networks and all that just always want Cowboys games. Like, I would be blown away if they flip that game out to put the Commanders Bears game in there. But I would love it. I would love the prime time. Let's see these two quarterbacks go at each other.
So the Niners are 3-3 right now. The Cowboys, they play against the Lions later. Maybe if they lose that game and maybe lose it big, I still think there's a chance, because especially if Jaden Daniels beats the Ravens this week, I can just see the NFL saying, hey, these two rookie quarterbacks are just far and ahead. They're the most exciting thing in football right now. We have seen the conversations about Jaden Daniels on all the morning shows, and I think those are coming now with Caleb Williams. Even though it was early in the morning, it was still the standalone game, and he did what he did. So I think it is going to be an upset if they do it, but I'm not ruling it out yet because just of how these two teams it feels like they're on a collision course. We'll see.
And even if it doesn't get flexed, I believe this would be a prime matchup as things sit, right? Your wild card weekends, Commanders, Bears, man, that could be some fun TV, some fun football. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming in. It was great as always. Where can people find your work? Because they need to be listening and they need to be reading what you're putting out there.
Always appreciate it, Mason. It's great talking ball with you. It's been great to get to know you as well these last couple of years. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Brendan Sugrue. That's Sugrue. Make sure you check out my work at thebearswire.com. We'll definitely be having some more posts and articles coming out of this game into the bye week. And then make sure you check out my podcast, the Bear Down Chicago podcast. We'll be live tonight at 7:30 p.m. with myself, Ryan Dangle, Jack Wright, Patrick Sheldon, Logan Bradley, and Cam Ellis. So always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And let's have a good bye week.
All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your football day with the Bears win. And you can focus on whatever the heck you want to. Bear down.